Yellowstone National Park is famous for its wildlife, its geysers, and yes, also its supervolcano. You may have seen headlines recently about how the park is due for a massive eruption that will devastate the entire United States. But are they right? In today's video, we're going to talk about what's actually happening at Yellowstone and why experts say there's nothing to worry about. This is Yellowstone National Park, America's first national park. It's home to overpopulation of bears and bison, beautiful canyons, and also a supervolcano that has erupted several times in the past. Yellowstone lies mostly in the northwest corner of Wyoming, but extends into parts of Montana and Idaho. Its most well-known feature is the Yellowstone Caldera, more commonly known as the Yellowstone Supervolcano. The caldera is a large volcanic crater formed by the collapse of the land above a magma chamber after a large eruption. And with large, I mean really large. The Yellowstone Supervolcano is the site of 3 of the largest eruptions in history, the last of which was 640,000 years ago. During this eruption, so much ash was released into the atmosphere that scientists estimate that it would have rained down over every state in the contiguous U.S. if the country existed back then. But while these eruptions were obviously large enough to leave their mark on the landscape, they also left their mark on the climate record. A study published in 2021 used ice core samples from the North Atlantic to determine the effects of the 3 largest eruptions at Yellowstone. They found that each eruption caused a global temperature drop of about 3 degrees Celsius or 5.4 degrees Fahrenheit. 1 degree might not sound like much, but it had devastating consequences for human ancestors who were living during the Younger Dryas period, a time when the Earth was transitioning from the last ice age to a warmer climate that allowed humans to start farming and raise livestock, eventually leading to the development of civilization. The researchers concluded that the rapid cooling caused by the ash from the Yellowstone eruptions led to the extinction of many plant and animal species and caused major disruptions to the development of early human societies. But while these ancient eruptions were clearly significant, the real question is whether we have anything to worry about today. After all, you can't go far without hearing someone mention that Yellowstone is due for another big eruption. So is it? The short answer is no, and the slightly longer answer is no, not today. There is no scientific evidence that an eruption is imminent. In fact, some recent developments might make an eruption less likely. So let's start off with the basics. Like most volcanoes, Yellowstone is a hotspot, meaning that it sits above a particularly hot area in the Earth's mantle. Unlike most volcanoes, however, Yellowstone isn't a single peak. Instead, it's a series of overlapping calderas formed by the sequential eruptions of magma from the same hotspot. Because the North American plate is slowly moving over the stationary hotspot, each new eruption is added to the previous one instead of building up alongside it. The result is a giant, somewhat irregularly shaped magma chamber, stretching roughly 43 by 28 miles, or 70 by 45 kilometers. This region is collectively known as the Greater Yellowstone Volcanic Field. The reason that this field is considered to be a supervolcano is because of the sheer volume of material that has been erupted from it. In order for an eruption to be classified as a supereruption, the ejected material must exceed 1,000 cubic kilometers or 240 cubic miles in volume. By comparison, the 1980 eruption of Mount St. Helens in Washington state ejected 1.2 cubic kilometers or 0.3 cubic miles of material, making it one of the most violent eruptions in U.S. history. But that size pales in comparison to the eruptions at Yellowstone. The youngest of the 3 super-eruptions at Yellowstone ejected about 2,500 cubic kilometers or 600 cubic miles of material. While there are thousands of volcanoes around the world, only a small number are considered supervolcanoes. In fact, Yellowstone is one of only 12 supervolcanoes on Earth. The others are mostly scattered throughout the Pacific Ring of Fire, with one notable exception. Of course, because Yellowstone is a supervolcano, doesn't mean that it's more dangerous than other volcanoes. It just means that its eruptions are larger, which is exactly why the United States Geological Survey, or USGS, monitors Yellowstone so closely. In addition to the 3 major eruptions, Yellowstone has had many smaller eruptions over the years. Most of these haven't even been dated, and experts don't even know if they were caused by one large event or many smaller events. What we do know is that the last eruption at Yellowstone was not a super eruption. It was a relatively small eruption by comparison that took place about 70 years ago in a location called the Norris Geyser Basin. Lava from this eruption created a new cone at the site of a geothermal area known as the Black Sand Basin. Eventually, the lava stopped flowing, and the site became a geyser basin once again. Today, hikers can explore the site and see how the eruption reshaped the landscape. But what about the future? Is there any way to predict when, or even if, the next eruption will take place? Well, we can look at past eruptions to get a general idea. The three largest eruptions at Yellowstone occurred between 2 million and 640,000 years ago. Each was followed by a period of dormancy ranging from 400,000 to 900,000 years. If we apply these numbers to the most recent eruption, it would suggest that we have at least another 200,000 years until the next super eruption. But that's just an average, and averages don't always tell the whole story. For example, there was a period of about 500,000 years between the two largest eruptions, but only about 40,000 years between the second and third largest. Given that we don't have a complete picture of all the eruptions that have happened at Yellowstone over the past 2 million years, it's impossible to say whether or not we're overdue for a large eruption. Some scientists argue that because the most recent super eruption was on the smaller side, we should be expecting a larger one sooner rather than later. Others counter this by saying that because the super eruptions seem to follow a fairly random pattern, we could be waiting for hundreds of thousands of years before the next one occurs. So how do we square this circle? Are we overdue for a large eruption, or is it too soon to tell? In truth, both sides have valid arguments, and it's possible that the truth lies somewhere in between. Rather than focusing on the big picture, it might be more productive to consider the smaller picture. As we mentioned earlier, the last eruption at Yellowstone wasn't a super eruption. In fact, it's been more than 14,000 years since the last time magma reached the surface at Yellowstone. But that doesn't mean that magma isn't still moving beneath the surface. In 1985, seismologists at the USGS began monitoring earthquakes in the region to see if there were any signs of increased activity. At first, there weren't many earthquakes in the area, and those that did happen were pretty small. But over the past 35 years, the number of earthquakes has been steadily increasing. This spike in seismic activity prompted the USGS to conduct a study in 2017 to better understand the unrest. Their research revealed something surprising. There's been a steady influx of magma into the magma chamber over the past few decades, possibly explaining the increase in earthquakes. So does this mean that Yellowstone is on the verge of erupting? Not necessarily. According to the USGS, this is a fairly common occurrence. They've observed similar increases in seismic activity every few years, which are usually followed by periods of calm. On top of that, the magma chamber at Yellowstone is enormous. While estimates vary, experts think that it contains about 1,000 cubic kilometers or 230 cubic miles of magma. That's enough magma to fill up 400 million Olympic-sized swimming pools. So even if the influx of magma seems like a lot, it's really just a tiny change in the overall volume. However, this might be good news in the long run. Remember how we said that the Earth's tectonic plates are constantly moving? Well, it turns out that magma from the Yellowstone hotspot isn't just adding to the existing magma chamber, it's also pushing the caldera itself to the east. Since 1985, the eastern portion of Yellowstone has grown by almost 9 feet or 3 meters. Eventually, the caldera will move off of the hotspot and become dormant. Unfortunately for anyone hoping to live to see it, this won't happen for another 100,000 years or so. For now, the best thing to do is to enjoy the stunning beauty of Yellowstone National Park, knowing that it's very unlikely that you'll be around to see the next super eruption. But maybe that's not such a bad thing. Thanks for watching. If you like this video, check out one of our others.